Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Guess what? We get to talk about two other iPhones this time around, and I've compared these last year, and I don't think I ever compared them when they first came out. I own the iPhone 8 since day one, I've owned the iPhone 10 since day one, and both of these phones are super cool. They have a lot going for them, and it's funny because they both came out at the same time, and they're both almost the exact same phone, just in different sizes, but there are some key differences between them. Without a doubt, there's a lot more advantages for the iPhone 10, that is for sure. And I'll be completely honest, if you have all the money in the world, obviously the iPhone 10 is the better phone to go. It has, much more capability, much more feature proof. It looks better, feels better. It is overall the better phone for sure. However, the price points of these are pretty different between them. The 8 Plus and iPhone 10, not so much, there's a little bit, but the iPhone 8 and iPhone 10 have some price differences between them even now in 2020. Now, the biggest advantage for both these phones now is that they both depreciated in the price points. The iPhone 10 right now on Amazon is selling for about $425 for the base model. However, the iPhone 8 right now for the base model on Amazon is selling for about $240. So that is quite a bit of difference right there. Now, like I said, if you have all the money in the world, go for the iPhone 10, but there is a $200 difference between them, which is pretty crazy. Now, to be completely honest, the iPhone 8 might be the better value per dollar, but looking on the front, you can obviously see there's some crazy differences between them. The iPhone 10 has the 5.8-inch Super Retina OLED display. That resolution is 1125 by 2436, and this is a very, very good panel. It looks very great, has a lot going for it. You have basically no bezel on the sides except for the notch up top, and it just looks like a far better future-proof design. We see the iPhone 11s, we see all these phones, and it looks more or less the same as the iPhone 10, and that's really, really cool. However, on the iPhone 8, we have a 4.7-inch Retina IPS panel. That resolution is 750 by 1334, and it's like pretty much, it's a good panel too. Like, I hate to say it, it's a bad panel, but the thing is that we're so familiar with this design and the overall screen technology that we just know that it's like an older iPhone panel. We don't consider it a bad panel, we just consider it an older iPhone panel. And yeah, there's a lot of bezel on it, but this design is something we're so familiar with. The iPhone 9 or iPhone SE2 that's about to come out is also going to be utilizing this design as well. So it's not like it's super behind in technology or the way it looks. It's just a little bit of an older iPhone design, which isn't really that big of a deal. We do have that front fingerprint sensor though, which I really do like. The iPhone 10 has Face ID, and like I've stated before, I do like Touch ID more than I like Face ID, but Face ID is much more practical, it's much more future proof. But that pretty much covers it up in terms of the front. We have lightning ports on the bottom, no headphone jacks in either of these, no micro SD card slots obviously. On the back, there's a little bit of a difference here too. So we have glass backs on both support wireless charging, which is really cool. Technically speaking, the iPhone 8 is the first iPhone to bring wireless charging. Even though the iPhone 10 and iPhone 8 were announced at the same time, the iPhone 10 was released later. But the iPhone 8 with that single camera setup, it's not a bad camera, and I'll get into in a second, but the iPhone 10 is definitely future-proofing itself. You do have that dual camera setup. That is something that, all these new phones that are coming out have that capability of having more than one camera sensor. So it's not an end-all be-all. It's not like if you have a single camera setup, you're done or it's dumb or something like that. But the iPhone 10 definitely has that advantage there, which is a huge advantage for the iPhone 10 for sure. You also have IP certification on both, IP67 dust and water resistance, which is really cool. So you can go up to 1 meter of water for 30 minutes. So IP certification in and of itself really helped promote this phone and even support this phone into the 2020s, because all these phones are being, IP certifications and all that stuff. So you're pretty much set in that standpoint, and that really pretty much covers it up in terms of the outside. Nothing much too else that's really different or the same between them. Now, hitting on the software, this is where things kind of get a little bit interesting, and I feel like I say that for every transition. Now, with the iPhone 8, it was released with iOS 11. Obviously, we can get iOS 13 on it, no problem, but the iPhone 10 did start with iOS 11, but it didn't start exactly on iOS 11.0, basically. It started off with iOS 11.1.1. which this is a pretty big difference. With one phone, it was supported, being supported for the whole entire iOS 11 series, but the iPhone 10 came out a little bit later in the game. So obviously you can get iOS 13 on both devices. Both of them are still going to get software updates, but I'm not too sure if the iPhone 8 will last as long as the iPhone 10. Now that's kind of a blanket statement. There's really not too much to support it, but the only way that makes me think that it might be the case is the design. The iPhone 10 has that newer design, but on top of that, the iPhone 10 didn't get all those iOS 11 versions, so it's kind of like the same. I understand it has the same chipsets and everything, but that, I don't know, it's kind of a stretch, I understand, but regardless, both phones are going to be supporting for a long time, so there's really no point in even talking about it right now. But I will say, and this is very a huge headlining thing that has been happening in a huge transition for the last couple months, is that checkra1n jailbreak. Both of these phones are supported with that checkra1n jailbreak, meaning whatever version of iOS you're on the iPhone 8 or the iPhone 10, you're able to jailbreak it, which is really cool. I love that. It's an unpatchable jailbreak. Whatever version of iOS you're on, it doesn't matter. It is semi-tethered, so you will have to jailbreak every time you jailbreak, but I do have ways to install this jailbreak onto your devices. I've already dropped tutorials and tweaks and all that stuff, so you guys can look back on the channel and watch those. But in terms of software, that really pretty much covers it. Now, hitting on the performance side of things, there's a lot of similarities here, but also some differences. Both have the Apple A11 Bionic chip, hexa-core CPUs. Now, there were two different models of the iPhone 10 and the iPhone 8. Both have 64 and 256 gigabyte models. The biggest difference, though, would come in the form of the RAM. The iPhone 8 has that 2 gigabytes of RAM on both models. The iPhone 10 has 3 gigabytes of RAM on both models. And one doesn't necessarily scream to me that it's way better than the other, or, there's way more RAM. Like, they're both very good performing phones, but without a doubt, the iPhone 10 definitely probably is the better performing device. Some people have said because the iPhone 8 does have that lower resolution panel, there's less pixels to push and all that, and I kind of do agree with that. But the iPhone 10 definitely, it just seems to be the better performing device. However, what I will tell you is that basically it comes in the form of the RAM management side. In terms of real world use, when you're opening apps and, using things day by day, I don't really think you're going to notice that big of a difference, if I'm being honest. I wish there was, because, you're paying more for an iPhone 10. I wanted there to be more for it, but there really wasn't the case. You're really pretty much paying for that new type of design. Other than that, everything is pretty much the same between the iPhone 8 and iPhone 10 in terms of performance. But like I said, you do have that extra gigabyte of RAM on the iPhone 10, which really does mean a lot in the long run. So between both, one isn't crazily more important than the other, but I will tell you the iPhone 10, in terms of the longevity and the RAM portion, is probably the better idea in the long run. So that pretty much covers it up there. Now moving on to the camera side of things, also really big differences between them. So the iPhone 10 has a dual camera setup, a 12 megapixel sensor wide angle lens and a 12 megapixel telephoto lens. And on the iPhone 8 we have a single 12 megapixel sensor, that's just a wide angle lens. And on the front, 7 megapixel cameras on both, pretty much the exact same front cameras, except the iPhone 10 support Face ID and the iPhone 8 does not. But really the back camera is where we see some of the major differences, and it's more so than just the software and the OIS and the this and that. It's basically comes in the form of the hardware features, okay? In terms of the actual frame rates and everything you can film in, both can support 4K at 60 frames, which is really cool. In 2020, that is a must-have. If we should be seeing like 4K at 120 here soon with like the Galaxy S20 Ultra and the 12 Pro that are coming out. But having 4K at 60 really does future-proof yourself really well. Most people are probably going to stick to 1080p at 30, but that 4K at 60 is a really cool feature. Both of these iPhones support it. But what I will say is that the biggest disadvantage for the iPhone 8 is that single camera setup. Right now in 2020, with all these leaks that are coming out and everything, we pretty much are assuming that more camera hardware features, the better. And when you have a phone that has multiple camera sensors, even just one extra one, that really does make it look and feel much more premium and much more in the times, if that makes any sense. With the iPhone 8, the single camera setup is kind of that older layout. It's not ugly, it's not bad, but you're definitely missing out on extra camera hardware features that those type of things support. So it's not an end all be all, it's not a crazy thing, but that is a cool advantage for the iPhone 10 that the iPhone 8 does not have. So in terms of the cameras department, I would probably recommend the iPhone 10 for sure. Now ending it off with the battery life. Both phones have pretty respectable battery sizes for the size of the phones. The iPhone 8 has a 1821 mAh battery. The iPhone 10 has a 2716 mAh battery. And between the two, there's not one that's like way crazy or better or anything like that. But I do think the iPhone 10 has the better battery life for sure. You're getting a much bigger battery life, and it's not really a crazy huge powerful phone you have to power. The screen is high resolution, but it's not much crazier. So that's definitely a huge advantage for the iPhone 10. The iPhone 8's battery life is pretty decent, but it's definitely not as good as the iPhone 10's. Standby time is pretty decent on both, but definitely without a doubt, I will say the iPhone 10 has the better battery life, hands down. Now, to kind of sum up the video and to answer the question, if you had to pick one up in 2020, should you pick up an iPhone 8 or an iPhone 10? Now, I'll be honest, the iPhone 8 is probably the easiest one to pick up. You can go to the Apple Store and pick it up brand new and there's like no problems with it. But for the people who want to buy it in the used market, by saving an extra $200 for an iPhone 8, that actually might mean a lot more to you than spending an extra $200 and gaining some of the cool features that the iPhone 10 has, especially with the release of the iPhone 12 coming out and all these iPhone 9s and iPhone 8s coming out. You might be better off just waiting, but if you have to pick one up now, I would probably recommend an iPhone 8 because you're getting a better value per dollar and you're going to see less depreciation. That iPhone 9 is going to come out, this phone's going to go down in value, but you're still going to feel like you have a pretty premium phone without a doubt. The iPhone 10 though, if you have all the money to spend, I would way recommend getting that. You're getting a much better phone, much better screen, much better hardware, more premium, extra camera hardware as well, and a better battery life. And I think that might be the better way to go for majority of people, but I still think that iPhone 8, if you're looking for a cheap phone in the used market, the iPhone 8 is still a killer device and it's super underrated for what you're getting. So if you want to pick up either of these phones, like I stated, links in the description, you can get them from there on Amazon for super cheap. You can help support the channel at the same time, but that is pretty much it. If you guys have any other questions or anything, leave it down in the comment section as well. Hit that like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber that we get really does count, so it means so much if you guys could hit that. Also check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my second channel, all those links are linked down below. I'd really appreciate it if you guys could check it out. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.